I walked into the main kitchen at 8:30. The air, usually thick with the scent of simmering stock and ambition, was sharp with the sterile smell of morning cleaning solution. My hands were still numb from the cold, a dull ache that reached deep into my bones. I had just enough time to be mocked for looking like I'd wrestled a ghost all night. He was already there, leaning against the polished steel pass, a perfect black apron over a painfully white chef's coat. "Well, well, look what the night dragged in," Adrian Thorne said, his voice a smooth, camera-ready baritone. A few of the line cooks, prepping for the lunch rush, snickered into their mise en place. "Must be nice, Julissa, starting the day on your own schedule." My name is Julissa Cummings. I am 34 years old, and I am the head pâtissière for the Aurelian Group. It's a title that sounds elegant, but in reality, I am a scientist. I am an architect of sugar and a chemist of chocolate, the quiet engineer in the cool, silent laboratory 2 floors beneath the fire and noise of this kitchen. This morning, my hair was still clinging to my neck with the damp chill of the tempering room, and my eyes felt like they'd been scrubbed with sea salt. I hadn't slept. The humidity control unit in the chocolate room, our brand new, top-of-the-line system, had failed around 10 last night. Not with a clean digital error, but with a slow, silent rise in temperature that was a death sentence for chocolate. It had turned our centerpiece for the big critics' dinner, a 2-foot-tall, impossibly delicate sculpture of interlocking cacao pods, into a dull, sweating tragedy. The cocoa butter crystals had lost their temper, creating a dusty, white film called Fat Bloom. It was ruined. I was the only one on call, the only one who understood the molecular science of what was happening. The lab smelled of stressed chocolate and the faint hum of failing machinery. I had hours before the entire piece would collapse into a formless, grainy puddle. That would mean a public relations disaster, a scathing review, and the potential loss of a Michelin star we had fought tooth and nail for. So, I did the only thing I could. I began the painstaking, manual process of retempering the entire structure, piece by agonizing piece. With my bare hands, protected only by thin latex gloves, I used slabs of cold marble and precise seeding crystals to coax the cocoa butter back into its stable beta V form. My shoulders screamed from the repetitive motion, my back wedged against a prep table. With my other hand, I monitored a digital thermometer, my focus narrowed to a single degree of variance. It was meticulous, agonizing work, something no culinary school textbook could ever teach. It was pure, desperate science. At 4:15 a.m., the sculpture was stable. The sheen had returned. The structure was solid, even more perfect than before. I stayed there on the cold tile floor until the sun came up, just watching it, making sure it held. I swiped my keycard to get into the main kitchen at 8:30. Adrian, my executive chef, was holding court by the espresso machine, already performing for his audience of young, impressionable cooks. He saw me, and his face split into that polished, practiced grin. I just stared at him, the ghost of chocolate still on my fingertips. "Adrian, I was here all night. The tempering room humidity control failed. I had to manually rebuild the entire centerpiece." He waved a dismissive hand, grabbing a perfectly pulled espresso shot. Right, a bit of kitchen drama. We all pull our weight, Julissa. Just try to make the 10 a.m. press meeting tomorrow. It sets an example. He walked away, leaving me standing there, invisible. "Welcome to the Aurelian Group. We have 2 types of chefs here, the creators and the performers." The credit flows upstairs, straight to the handsome chefs with the television deals and the perfect sound bites. The blame, however, flows downstairs, directly into the quiet, unseen labs, landing on people like me. I am not one of them. I don't do cooking segments on morning shows. I don't laugh at the crude jokes in the walk-in freezer. The PR department, in my last review, said I lacked camera presence. They said I wasn't a brand ambassador. I was just the chef who kept the brand ambassadors from serving desserts that tasted like chalk. I'm not naive, though. I'm meticulous. Back in my lab before I left for the day, I saved everything. The time-stamped security footage showing me working alone at 4:15 a.m. the maintenance alert history for the failed humidity unit. The entire digital ticket timeline showing my logged crisis response versus the automated system pings from Adrian's account, which had been blissfully silent all night. I zipped the file and saved it to my personal cloud drive in a folder labeled recipes. It was not the first file in there. Adrian loves to talk about his team. His team mostly consists of Leo, a young commis chef who is genuinely sweet but completely overwhelmed. Leo makes a mistake. I fix it. Adrian then presents Leo's progress in executive meetings as a sign of his own brilliant mentorship, while burying my work under the umbrella of research and development. It's a pattern. Every time a food critic publishes a review, the first line of the press release reads, "Executive Chef Adrian Thorne's vision is on full display. It doesn't matter what the dish is." Last month, it was my deconstructed lemon tart. This month, it will undoubtedly be the proactive crisis management he oversaw during the chocolate sculpture disaster. I took another screenshot. It nestled quietly next to the others in the recipes folder. As I finally got to my small office, my hands aching, I saw him, the man who delivered our dairy. He was older, with a quiet, weathered face, wearing a simple work coat with the words Pennington Farms embroidered over the pocket. His name tag just said Arthur. He was dropping off crates of fresh cream, but he wasn't just unloading. He was watching, pausing by the glass wall of my lab, his gaze sweeping over the equipment, the notes, the people. He looked at me, then at Adrian, who was now laughing loudly in the main kitchen, then back at me. His eyes were sharp. He wasn't just looking at the scuffs on the floor. He was looking at the cracks in the foundation. For a second, he looked like he understood every single ingredient being misused in this entire building. He gave me a slow, almost imperceptible nod, then loaded his empty crates onto his hand truck and disappeared through the delivery entrance. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The adrenaline from the all-nighter had curdled into a thick, buzzing exhaustion that made the thought of my commute impossible. Around 3 p.m., I was in the staff break room, a sterile white box that always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and disinfectant. I was trying to choke down a stale croissant from the day-old bin. It was flaky on the outside, but dense and chewy inside. I was too tired to care. I was just staring out the small, grimy window at the alley. The door hissed open and Arthur, the dairy delivery man, came in. It was strange seeing him without his hand truck. He just walked to the coffee machine, saw it was empty, and sighed quietly. "Tough day," I muttered, more to myself than to him. He looked over. He didn't smile, but his eyes were observant. He nodded toward my sad croissant. "That looks challenging." I actually snorted, a dry, tired sound. "It's fuel, barely." I tore the croissant in half. It ripped with a sad, dry sound. I held out the other piece to him. "You look like you could use some too." He hesitated, then took it. "Thank you, Julissa." I froze for a second. I was wearing my chef's coat with my name embroidered on it, but people like Adrian never used my name. They used pastry or her or just you. Hearing my name from this quiet man felt strangely human. We stood there for a long minute, side by side, eating a bad croissant in complete silence, watching a line cook smoke a cigarette in the alley. The only sounds were the hum of the ice machine and the distant clang of the kitchen. He finished his half first, neatly folding the napkin. He looked out the window, not at me. "The things that last," he said, his voice soft but clear. "The flavors that people truly remember. They're rarely the things anyone knows the name of the chef who created them." A laugh escaped me. It wasn't a happy sound. It was sharp and bitter and cracked with exhaustion. It was the sound of every recipe I'd ever perfected that was later rebranded as a manager's inspiration. It was the sound of being called lacking presence by PR. "You have no idea, Arthur," I said. "You have no idea." He just nodded, as if I'd confirmed something he already knew. "Get some rest, Julissa. The fire in the kitchen is always going to burn." He left the break room. The next morning, I came in feeling bruised but functional. I'd gotten 4 hours of sleep. I was bracing for the next fire, the next casual theft of credit. But when I got to my small desk in the lab, I stopped. Sitting on my keyboard was a small, unlabeled glass jar filled with a dark, amber liquid. I picked it up. It was heavy and it smelled incredible, a rich floral scent I recognized instantly as rare buckwheat honey. Tucked under it was a small, square note, the kind from a delivery driver's pad. The handwriting was neat, precise block letters. "For the true artist." I looked around. The lab was just starting to fill. No one was watching me. Arthur was long gone. I had never told anyone I liked buckwheat honey. I held the jar. It was the first time I'd felt a genuine warmth in 24 hours. That warmth lasted until the 11 a.m. strategy meeting. Adrian was at the front of the room, radiating smugness. His leadership during the critics' dinner was the main topic. The group's board of directors was dialed in on the giant screen, looking impatient. "As you can see," Adrian said, clicking to a slide titled "A New Flavor Narrative." "My team anticipated the evolving palate of our clientele and implemented a dynamic sensory experience that preserved 100% of our brand integrity." I stared at the slide, the diagrams, the flavor profiles. They were mine. It was the 18-month menu architecture I designed, the deconstructed concepts, the long-term vision I had outlined in my notes to elevate our pastry program from an afterthought to a main event. He had taken my technical notes, my exact plan for balancing acidity, sweetness, and texture, and stolen them. He just spray-painted them with corporate jargon. My molecular structure was now his flavor narrative. My careful Maillard reaction was his kiss of fire. "This is impressive, Adrian," one of the board members' voices boomed from the speaker. "Truly visionary thinking. This is the kind of forward-looking leadership we need." "Thank you, sir," Adrian said, puffing up. "We're just happy to drive results." I sat in the back, my stomach clenching. The sweet taste of the honey was gone, and the cold, bitter taste of day-old coffee was back in my mouth. I'd grabbed a bagel from the box Adrian had brought for his team. It was the last one, hard and cold. I just tore at it, invisible. The final blow came at 3 p.m. An email landed in my inbox. Subject: Project Autumnal Realignment. My blood went cold. Project Autumnal was my baby. I had built its flavor architecture from scratch. 18 months of my life. 18 months of late nights and weekends designing a menu I was genuinely proud of. Adrian didn't even have the decency to call me into his office. He just sauntered over, leaning on my lab station, smelling like expensive cologne. "Hey, Julissa, you see the email? Great news." I looked up at him, my face blank. "I'm being reassigned." "I'm freeing you up," he corrected, that plastic smile firmly in place. "Look, you're a rock star with the R&D, that's where you belong. You're better behind the scenes, more suited to the lab work. Now that Autumnal is in its final guest-facing phase, I need someone with, a storytelling presence." Presence. The word the PR team used. The word for people who charmed reporters and gave good sound bites, not the word for people who actually created the things that tasted good. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest, the acidic burn of pure, undiluted rage. 18 months. He was handing my work, my finished, polished work, to someone else to present as their own. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show him the recipes folder. I wanted to tell him he was a talentless, parasitic fraud. But I knew the game. Arguing would get me labeled difficult. Getting emotional would make me unstable. So I swallowed the fire. I compressed it, packed it down into the cold, hard place inside me where I kept all the other recipes. I just nodded. "Understood, Adrian. I'll transfer the documentation." "Atta girl," he said, patting my lab station as if I were a piece of equipment. "That's the team's spirit." He walked off, probably to go take credit for someone else's lunch order. I sat there staring at my monitor. The sounds of the lab, the whirring of the mixers, the hushed timers, the rattle of the ventilation, all faded. It was just me and the screen. I moved my mouse to the bookmark bar in my browser. My cursor hovered over the folder labeled Project Autumnal Active. I right-clicked. Select Rename. I typed Archive. I hit Enter. It was a tiny, silent digital funeral. A shadow fell over my desk. I didn't look up, assuming it was someone needing a recipe conversion, but the shadow lingered. I looked to my left. It was Arthur. He was pushing his hand truck, moving slowly down the service corridor. He paused right by my lab's glass wall. His gaze flickered from my face down to my monitor, where the newly renamed archive folder was starkly visible. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He just met my eyes and gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't pity. It wasn't sympathy. It was certification. It said, "I saw that." He pushed his hand truck away, disappearing around the corner, the quiet squeak of his wheels the only sound he left behind. I spent the next week in a state of cold, quiet efficiency. I methodically transferred every recipe for Project Autumnal, writing instructions so clean and sterile a child could follow them. I answered my tickets. I attended the pre-shift meetings. I did exactly what was in my job description and not one single extra gram of innovation more. The fire in my chest, the hot acid of rage from that day had cooled. It had compressed into something heavy, hard, and patient. Then on Thursday afternoon, the invitation appeared. It wasn't an email. It was a calendar alert appearing instantly on my schedule. Subject: Executive and Investor Briefing 9:00 a.m. mandatory. The location was the PDR, the private dining room, the massive, glass-walled tomb on the top floor, the one reserved for the board. The invite was for the following morning, Friday. The strangest part was the sender. There wasn't one. It was a system-generated appointment. No organizer, no context. I checked the attendee list. It was short, and it made my stomach clench. The VP of Operations, the VP of Marketing, our Chief Legal Counsel, and two names I only recognized from the quarterly shareholder reports, members of the board. And sandwiched right between them, his name shining like cheap gold, Adrian Thorne. Of course, I wasn't invited. I felt the familiar dull sting of being left in the basement lab while the adults talked. But something was wrong. The PDR was behind a second layer of security. It required level 1 access. My keycard stopped at level 3. I couldn't even get off the elevator on that floor. On a hunch, I opened the building's central access control dashboard. It was a system I only had read-only privileges for, a tool I used to diagnose equipment connectivity issues. I typed my own employee ID into the search bar, and I stopped breathing. A new entry, time stamped at 5:30 a.m. this morning, hours before I even woke up. My access level, granted level 1. Duration, 24 hours. The authorization hadn't come from Adrian. It hadn't come from HR. It had been granted by a system-level account I'd never seen before, an account named Source Integrity Shadow. Someone had unlocked the door for me. Someone had slipped me a key to a meeting I wasn't supposed to know about. The cold, heavy thing in my chest suddenly felt less like despair and more like a weapon. I needed air. I walked to the staff exit that overlooked the main delivery bay 4 floors below. It was a good place to think, to watch the anonymous flow of trucks. Down below, the morning rush was finishing. A group of men in dark, perfectly tailored suits stood by the executive car service entrance. And standing with them, not unloading crates, not pushing a hand truck, was Arthur. He wasn't wearing his simple work coat. He was in a dark charcoal wool suit that fit him perfectly, holding a slim leather briefcase. He wasn't invisible, he was just still. He was listening as one of the board members, a man I recognized from the shareholder report, spoke to him, his posture respectful, almost deferential. As I stood there, frozen, my hand gripping the metal rail, Arthur looked up. Straight up, across the delivery bay, his eyes found mine instantly. There was no surprise. He just looked at me and then, just like he had at my desk, he gave me a single, slow, deliberate nod. This one was different. This one didn't say, "I see you." This one said, "It's time." Of course, here is part 3 of the story, the taste of truth. Part 3: when I got back to my lab, the kitchen was buzzing. The gossip channels were on fire with rumors. The old CEO had retired abruptly. A full restructuring was imminent. Adrian, of course, was impervious to the anxiety. He was too busy accepting congratulations for a promotion that hadn't even happened. He spent an hour on the phone with a publicist, his voice loud and obnoxious. "That's right, Vice President of Culinary Innovation. Yes, gloss finish. And I need the new business cards by tomorrow at 8:00, rush delivery." The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it, that was when I made the decision. For my entire career, I had been the silent savior, the one who stayed all night to fix things before anyone in management even knew they were broken. I cleaned up Adrian's messes, I rebalanced Leo's failed recipes, and I absorbed the failures of the visionary leaders so they could keep collecting their bonuses. No more. At 3:15 p.m., an automated alert hit my queue. A minor, non-critical bug in the ice cream machine's pasteurizer, ticket K55. A simple fix. I knew exactly what it was, a small calibration error I'd been meaning to patch on my own time. Normally, I'd have it fixed in 5 minutes. No ticket required. This time, I just looked at the ticket. I assigned it to Leo. I set its priority to medium exactly as the protocol dictated. I added a note: per SLA, requires validation by end of day tomorrow. I wasn't going to save them anymore. I was going to let the process speak for itself. Let the small cracks show. I spent the rest of the afternoon not fighting fires, but preparing my case. I went back into my recipes folder. I ran a content comparison on my original autumnal architecture document and Adrian, new flavor narrative presentation. The content overlap was 92%. I pulled the security footage from the night of the storm. I forwarded the maintenance alerts to my private email. I went into the metadata of Adrian's stolen PowerPoint file. I found the Properties tab. Author, Julissa Cummings. Last modified by Adrian Thorne. I saved a screenshot. I wasn't just building a safety net anymore. I was building a gallows. The counterattack came at 4:30 p.m. an email from Human Resources. Subject, Mandatory Performance Alignment Cummings. Attached was a calendar invite for 8:30 a.m. tomorrow, just 30 minutes before the mysterious executive meeting. The invite list was small: me, Adrian, and our HR business partner. The agenda line was a sterile execution order, review of performance deficiencies. They were building a paper trail. They were going to fire me for cause, using the unfixed ice cream machine as the justification. 6 months ago, this email would have sent me into a blind panic. Today, I just felt the cold, satisfying click of a lock sliding into place. I didn't argue. I simply forwarded the invitation to my personal email, then replied directly to HR. Thank you. To ensure accuracy and maintain a clear record of the discussion, I will require a third-party witness from legal to be present. I will also be recording the audio for my own notes. It was a cold, procedural bluff, but it signaled I wasn't coming in as a victim. I was coming in as a litigant. Just then, my inbox chimed. An email from the lead food critic who had dined with us. Subject: incredible work on the new menu. The email was gushing. The dessert course was a masterpiece. Thank you, Adrian and your team, and please send our specific, monumental thanks to Julissa Cummings. Her architectural approach to flavor is a work of art. Adrian had been copied. The blood drained from his face. Before I could even click reply, the email vanished from my inbox. A moment later, a new system message appeared. This message was recalled by Adrian Thorne. He had tried to erase it. He had tried to erase me, but he was too slow. The original notification was still on my phone's lock screen, and I, a creature of meticulous habit, already had my hand on the print screen key. The screenshot, the critic's praise, my name, was already saved. It was the final file in the kit. The next morning, I bypassed the HR meeting entirely. An automated email at 6:00 a.m. had postponed it, citing an executive conflict. Adrian hadn't been copied on that cancellation. I pressed the button for the top floor. My keycard, which should have been rejected, chirped its acceptance. When I stepped out, the receptionist's board mask evaporated. "Of course, Ms. Cummings," she said, her voice warm. "We've been expecting you." She handed me a heavy leather-bound folder and a solid black access card. I pushed open the heavy glass doors to the PDR. The room was vast, dominated by a single monolithic black table that reflected the city skyline. The attendees were exactly as the invite had described, and Adrian. He was sitting near the head of the table, a new, glossy vice president, culinary innovation nameplate set up in front of him. He saw me walk in. His smile faltered, replaced by a flash of pure confusion, then anger. He looked at the folder in my hand. He looked at the black access card. He looked at my name printed on a heavy cardstock nameplate sitting on the table not far from his. "Late again, Julissa," he stage whispered, designed for the whole table to hear. A few nervous titters broke the silence. The joke landed. I was once again the disorganized artist who couldn't keep time. Before I could respond, a hand was raised at the far end of the table. A quiet command for silence. Every eye swiveled. At the head of the table, in the seat of power, sat a man. He had been there the entire time, sitting so perfectly still he was just part of the room's expensive furniture. It was Arthur. He wasn't wearing the charcoal suit from the loading dock or the work coat from the delivery run. He was in a simple dark navy suit, immaculate and functional. "She's with me," Arthur said. The words were quiet, a statement of fact dropped onto the silent, polished table. The entire magnetic field of the room reversed. Adrian just stared, his face a comical mask of disbelief. "Arthur," he stammered, "what the hell are you here to serve the coffee?" Arthur didn't answer him. He simply opened a slim leather folder. "Good morning. For the past 6 weeks, I have been the acting chairman of the board of Aurelian Group, conducting a full top-to-bottom operational audit. My name is Arthur Pennington." A collective sharp intake of breath sucked the remaining air from the room. "I have been on every floor at every hour. I've been in your kitchens, I've been in your break rooms. And what I have learned," he said, his gaze finally landing on me, "is that we have 2 companies operating in this building. One company performs. It generates buzzwords and claims credit. It is very loud. And then there is the other company, the one that operates. The one that builds, that fixes, that actually does the work. It is very quiet." He gestured to the empty chair directly to his right, the seat of the second in command. "Today, Julissa," Arthur said, his voice cutting through the silence, "your seat is here." I stood up. The sound of my chair sliding back was as loud as a gunshot. I walked the few steps to the head of the table and sat down. The power shift was complete. It wasn't a coup, it was a correction. "This is an executive briefing," Arthur said, as the main view screen flickered to life. "So let's review the data." On the screen, a title appeared. Exhibit 1, Project Autumnal Version History. The screen split, showing my original document next to Adrian's presentation. "We ran a standard content hash analysis," Arthur continued. "Mr. Thorne's visionary narrative is 92% identical, verbatim, to Ms. Cummings' original culinary plan. The primary changes were, as far as we can tell, replacing technical specifications with the words story and journey." The screen changed. Exhibit 2, the chocolate tempering failure. The security footage filled the screen, time-stamped at 4:15 a.m. It showed me alone working on the sculpture. It was followed by an email Adrian had sent to the executive team at 8:05 a.m. Arthur read the subject line aloud. Proactive leadership, how my team averted the crisis. Adrian made a small, choked gasp. The data was cold, sterile, and absolute. It was the autopsy of Adrian's entire career. The screen changed one last time. It was my screenshot. The file properties. Arthur read the 2 lines slowly. Author, Julissa Cummings, last modified by Adrian Thorne. This is a misrepresentation, Adrian stammered, half standing. It's collaboration, I provide the vision, the presence. Arthur just slowly raised his right hand and extended a single index finger. Adrian stopped, the word presence dying on his lips. Arthur turned to the chief legal counsel. Your assessment. The lawyer cleared his throat. Based on the documented evidence, the actions taken constitute a deliberate and sustained pattern of internal intellectual property theft, gross mismanagement, and fraudulent misrepresentation to the board. Arthur slid a sealed envelope across the polished black table. It stopped perfectly in front of Adrian. He then placed a second, open envelope in front of me. Inside was a new organizational chart. At the very top, a solid black box, Arthur Pennington, chairman. A single line descended from his box to a new position, one that hadn't existed this morning. The title read, Interim Chief Culinary Officer. The name inside the box read, Julissa Cummings. The final piece of evidence appeared on the screen. It was my screenshot of the critic's email, followed immediately by the system alert. This message was recalled by Adrian Thorne. If the metadata was the trial, this was the confession. Adrian made a sound, a low, guttural, hollow noise. He didn't fall. He just deflated, sinking into his chair. Arthur took a simple black fountain pen from his breast pocket. He signed his name at the bottom of a page. Please have Mr. Thorne escorted from the building, he said. His network access is revoked. Effective now. The 2 security men who had been standing silently by the doors stepped forward. As they moved, my laptop, still plugged into the console, chimed. The leadership review meeting on our calendars had just been closed. The event was over. The room was quiet. It was just me and Arthur at the head of the empty battlefield of a table. I looked down. Next to my folder sat a mug. It was not a paper cup. It was heavy white ceramic from the private executive kitchen. A wisp of steam rose from it, carrying a faint, impossible scent. Chamomile tea and buckwheat honey. He had this here waiting for me. I wrapped my fingers around the warm ceramic. It was heavy and real. I lifted the mug, and for the first time all day, I took a sip. It was hot and sweet, and it burned a clean path all the way down. It wasn't the bitter sludge of the break room. It wasn't the taste of being overlooked. It tasted like acknowledgement. I opened the new leather-bound notebook that had been in my folder. I took out my own pen. I did not feel triumphant. I felt stable. I wrote my first agenda item. 1. Implement true system-wide attribution protocols for recipe development. I looked up. Arthur was watching me. He picked up the suspension order with Adrian's name on it. He drew a single, sharp, deliberate line through it, not a signature, a deletion. He looked at me, his gaze sharp, focused, and utterly devoid of sentiment. Begin, he said.